Ladies and gentlemen, imagine that you're sitting in a football stadium, part of a large crowd, singing together, watching the field, seeing the players play. Or imagine that you're sitting in a theater, sitting in rows, much smaller crowd, watching the stage. Well, actually, you are sitting in a theater. So imagine that you're sitting in a church, even a smaller crowd, probably, being part of worship. There's an atmosphere of expectation, seeing what's happening there in front. 3 institutions, 3 crowds of people. So what do they have in common? Well, they're all religions. They give meaning and purpose to human life. This is what makes life worthwhile for many people. Take sports, for example. Sports is very important for many people. Years ago, I talked to a Feyenoord supporter. Must have been the dark ages. I mean, back then when there were still Feyenoord supporters. And he told me that whenever I enter the Kuip, the Feyenoord stadium, that's my church. This is where I bring my children, where I want my family to be. And every Monday morning when I wake up, I'm looking forward to next Sunday for the next match to begin. And when I sit there together with 40,000 people singing songs, I feel connected in a very, very deep way. Or take art. We've lived in Amsterdam for 6 years, and I've met many people there who go to the concert building, the Concertgebouw, as if it is their church. The space is sacred somehow. There is this atmosphere of expectation, yes. And when the conductor and the musicians come in, well, there are special gestures, bows, rituals. And I've spoken to many people who say, actually, this is the most important part of my life. Many people there in Amsterdam feel as if art makes them feel what life is all about. It makes them feel that they touch the mysteries of life. So far, these 3 institutions, so far the similarities. Art, the religion for Amsterdam. Sport, the religion for Rotterdam. The church, the religion for Barneveld. But what's the difference? Well, that's money. Money is the difference. Only one of these institutions, the church, is standing on its own legs. It's paying its own bills for more than 100 years already. Whereas the other 2 are heavily subsidized in many ways by the state, by local governments, directly, indirectly. Billions of euros are going into these sectors every year. And what does it mean in practice? Well, let me give an example. Let's say that you go to a concert or another cultural event and you buy a ticket. Well, what's the price? Let's say 30 euros. Do you know how much it would be if the government would not pay 1 cent in subsidies? Well, there was an economist, Ayo Klamer, who specialized in art and subsidies, and he told me it would be 300 euros, 10 times as much. Guess how many people would go to a theater or a concert if you had to pay 10 times as much? How many of you would send their children to music class if you had to pay for it all yourself? Well, I'm afraid that's going to happen. The world is going to change. It is already changing, by the way. I mean, governments all over the Western world are withdrawing from society. Part of it, of course, is due to the financial crisis. I mean, every government has to look into its budgets very carefully now. But the other thing is ideology. I mean, it's liberalism. Governments think increasingly, why should we do what the government should, what society should do? So, well, of course, it's not as far as in church everywhere, like the sports sector, for example. It's still in the Middle Ages. I mean, the sports sector is like the Roman Catholic Church in 1500. It can get away with everything. It's highly corrupted. It does its tournaments in all the wrong countries, China and Russia. There's a cover-up of doping scandals. There's match fixing. There's shadowy financial constructions, like the PSV Stadium in Eindhoven, or Spanish clubs buying players they can't afford, but mysteriously they can, for amounts of money that would help millions of children through starvation. So the sports sector, well, is causing increasing irritation and concern, but I must admit, it's still not that far that a government withdraws from it. On the contrary, government officials are sitting in the front rows of stadiums and kissing winning sport people and walking in procession through stadiums. But I believe this is going to change. The future will be different. With arts, you see this already. The last government reduction planning was about 200 million euros reduction on the art budget. And there was a huge protest, as you all know. There was even a March for Civilization, I think in 2011, as if we all would be going back living in caves if the government would not pay your theater ticket anymore or pay for the music lessons of your child. It made me think, actually, of priests and pastors in the 19th century protesting when the government decided to separate from the church. They said the country would go to the dogs. Our children would grow up like barbarians. Our civilization would decline. But it didn't help the church back then, and it won't help the art sector now. So that's where we are. Our three religions, the sports sector still in the Middle Ages, the art sector kicking and struggling, drawn into modernity, slowly but certainly. And who does it meet there in modernity? Who was there all along? Well, that's the church. It was there for 100 years already, standing on its own legs, paying its own bills. And actually, the church is the most successful institution of modernity. It can teach very important lessons to the arts sector and the sports sector. Now, I know what you think. You think he must be kidding. I mean, the church, successful? Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, I know that. When I was born in 1969, about 80% of the Dutch were members of a church. And now it's less than 40. So, yeah, true. But consider what would happen if the government would withdraw all the money from the arts sector, for example, and if everyone had to pay for its own ticket. Well, fewer and fewer people would be involved in what we would call serious art, very expensive art. I guess some people would be involved, but the minority that would support the art sector and very serious art would be a minority, let's say, from the canal belt, the grachtengordel. People with capital and with enough motivation to be involved in very expensive, very serious art. And the rest, well, they would go to Joop van den Ende, or read 50 Shades of Grey, or do something creative at home, singing under the shower, doing some good things with friends together. But I guess probably most people would go to art light, so to speak. Well, that's exactly what has happened with the church. As soon as the government decided to cut loose from the church, masses of people started to leave. Why? Well, there was no status involved anymore, no money. It didn't help your position in society. So the only people who would carry on were those who were intrinsically motivated, highly motivated, to support the church, to be involved in what we would call serious religion. I mean, the kind of religion that asks a price. And, well, most serious religions, either art, sports, or the church, they do ask a price. It costs a lot of time and money to be involved in church, at least seriously. It costs a lot of your life also. The church asks you to adapt your life to certain values. So most people probably are not very prepared to do so, so they drop out. And that's what happened. And, well, the rest, they would go to religion light. They would read 50 Shades of Happiness, or they would do some other things, probably, in the religious sphere, but not the kind of things that asks high prices. But yet, you know, there are more people in church on every Sunday morning than there are in the football stadiums on Sunday afternoon, or in the theater on Sunday nights. Do you know how many people attended a professional football match on Sunday afternoons? You know, the kinds that all newspapers write about, that our television channels are fighting about. Well, it's about, give or take, 115,000. And what about cultural events, concerts, theater shows? Well, it's about 250,000 on the average every weekend. 250,000. Do you know about the church? Well, the latest statistical records say that about 8% of the Dutch attends church weekly. That's between 1 and 1.5 million. So, after 100 years of separation from church and state, after 100 years of paying your own bills, the church is able to draw 5 to 6 times as many people than the art sector and the sports sector. That's incredible. I mean, that's amazing. What's the secret? What are the kind of lessons that art and sports can learn from the church? Well, there are two. And one of them is give the institution back to the people. Religion, whatever religion, does not belong to bobos and officials. So the church has learned, I mean, not every church, but most churches have learned to develop from a bureaucratic, top-down institution to a network of local communities, of mostly volunteers, supporting each other, giving each other company, and working together on things they really, really appreciate. I mean, I'm a pastor in Amsterdam, and when I look into the church hall on a Sunday morning, I know that all the people there, they are not there because they must. They're not there for any obligation. They're there because they want. That's what voluntary things are about, voluntary religion. So give the institution back to the people. Let them carry it. Let go of money, bureaucratic structures, etc., etc. Don't organize marches to The Hague for the marches for civilization, or don't put pressure on the government. Trust that your institution is something worthwhile in itself. Give it back to the people. That's lesson one. Second lesson, well, it's you need to restore, to find again your core mission. As soon as the government separates from the institution, you're thrown back on the very important hard questions of life. The church did that in the 19th century, and again, the church has to learn a lot still, but it's doing that. Why are we on earth in the first place? Why are we important? Why should we go on with this if it doesn't make any money, if it doesn't give you any position or status? Also a good question for yourself, of course. If you're involved in church or in any other of these religions, would I still do it if it didn't pay me 1 cent? If it didn't give me any position or status or to talk about on birthday parties? If everyone would find me ridiculous if I did so? But I believe that's what needs to be done. The art sector and the sports sector are spoiled by money and status. But I believe deep inside, there still is the drive that makes children to build sand castles, or to draw sand paintings, and to make music, or to win and play games. And only if that drive is found again, the art and the sports will be able to go into modernity when the religious market becomes a more level playing field. Thank you.